Joining me now, Democratic Representative Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania, ranking member of the House Budget Committee. Congressman, good to see you. Happy Memorial Day. So what happens now? Are you confident that lawmakers can put a stop to this so-called anti-weaponization fund?
Well, good to be with you. You know, you have to take a step back for a moment and think about the last almost 18 months that Donald Trump has again been president. And what we have seen is time and time again, most of my Republican colleagues have just loyally, obsequiously gone along with whatever President Trump demands of them. And the few who have spoken out or not been with him 100% of the time, President Trump has gone after in Republican primaries and has defeated. So forgive me if I will remain a little bit skeptical that when push comes to shove, Republicans really will finally and permanently stand up to this president when it comes to the outrageous slush fund for the criminals who assaulted over 140 Capitol Police officers, or the separate $1 billion for Trump's big, beautiful ballroom.
Well, we saw House Republicans abruptly canceling that vote to rein in Trump's war in Iran after it became clear that it was going to pass and essentially put an end to the war. What do you think it's going to take in the case of this anti-weaponization fund and some of the other controversial moves the president has made recently?
You know, it's amazing the power that just 3 House Republicans could have, or just 3 to 4 Senate Republicans could have, on not just these matters that we've been discussing, but any other matter of public policy. That is all that it would take when you think about it. It's actually a very small percentage of Republican members of Congress that really could make a crucial difference. The problem we have specifically in the House, though, is, of course, as a majority rule body, it is the Speaker and Republican leadership that is in control of the calendar. So unless we have a few brave Republicans willing to join us on a discharge petition, we won't actually get a vote on the bipartisan piece of legislation that you just talked about moments ago in terms of stopping once and for all this ridiculous slush fund.
Congressman Boyle, if you can stand by, we have some breaking news, and I'd like to get your reaction to it on the other side. We have just learned that Tulsi Gabbard is resigning as the Director of National Intelligence. MS Now's Jake Traylor is following this for us from the White House. What can you tell us, Jake?
Yeah, Chris, this is something we learned of moments ago, according to a senior White House official as well as a senior administration official talking to MS Now, telling us that Tulsi Gabbard has resigned from her position as the director of the Director of National Intelligence. That is per a White House official and a senior administration official. One White House official telling MS Now the reasoning for that resignation is coming due to Gabbard's attempt to support her husband as he battles a rare form of bone cancer. We are working to learn the details of that resignation, the timing of that as well. I will note, though, just for a little bit of context there, Chris, is there's been a lot of speculation around Gabbard's involvement in the administration, particularly around President Trump and the White House's involvement in foreign relations in Venezuela, particularly in Iran, as this war has raged on for months now. Gabbard initially was a longstanding critic of any type of regime change wars globally. Her initial candidacy and then initial endorsement of President Trump back in 2024 was centered around her continually saying President Trump will not lead us into new wars. And so there's been a lot of questioning and reporting around Gabbard's involvement in this administration as it has continued and pursued war with Iran over the past couple of months. But as of now, we know that her resignation has been sent to the president's desk, that he has been made aware of it. And these two administration officials are saying that this will come imminently. We're still working to learn some of the details of this resignation, some of the behind-the-scenes matter, which we'll bring to you as soon as we get there, Chris.
Jake, thanks so much for that. And certainly we wish all the best to Tulsi Gabbard's husband as he fights a battle against, as she put it, an extremely rare form of bone cancer. But Brendan Boyle, if I can come back to you on this, obviously the president's intelligence team has been under fire recently. That includes, I think, first and foremost, Kash Patel and the FBI. The members of the intelligence team we haven't talked about are the CIA director, the NSA director, but I wonder what your reaction is to a member of his intelligence team stepping down.
Yeah, well, first, Chris, I share the sympathies you expressed to Tulsi Gabbard's husband having this apparently very rare form of cancer. So I wish them both the best in terms of this health matter. I served with Tulsi Gabbard in the House of Representatives for several terms. Although the member I served with in the House of Representatives is almost a different person from the person who would ultimately join and endorse President Trump and join his cabinet. The thing that I remember even having personal conversations with her way back in 2016 when she was a co-chair of the Bernie Sanders for President campaign, and she was attempting to get me to support Bernie Sanders. And what I remember from this conversation is she was passionately against Hillary Clinton because, and these were exact words, she was saying, quoting her, "I can't support Hillary Clinton because she will cause a war with Iran. And if there's one thing I'm committed to, it's ensuring this country does not go to war with Iran." Those were her exact words to me in the members' cloakroom some years ago. And now here we are. She is actually serving in the cabinet of the president who did launch a war in Iran, a completely unnecessary war of choice. It's unfortunate that she never stood up and actually resigned as a matter of principle. So we shall see who replaces her. Given the track record of this administration, I can't imagine it will be someone who will in any way be willing to stand up to this president on any matter.
Yeah, I was actually covering Bernie Sanders' campaign, and many a time she got in front of the microphone before he came to the podium and said exactly what she told you. I wonder, as we look at these times, and obviously the conversations about the war recently have always centered around the impact that it's had on the economy. And we talked about that poll. Confidence in the economy among Republicans has dropped to its lowest point of Trump's second term, but confidence in Democrats is dropping too. Can either party get back the confidence of the American people?
Well, for the first time, I believe in 15 years, we've seen more Americans now trust Democrats on the economy than Republicans. That said, I'm pretty realistic about the challenge that we as Democrats face as a party. But I think now we have the best opportunity that we've had maybe in a decade and a half to finally talk to and address the economic concerns of the American people. I think in these upcoming elections, we as Democrats need to do what this president is not doing, and that is focus like a laser beam on the poor economic condition facing most American families and present a real agenda on what we will do to address it. While this president's worried about billion-dollar ballrooms and slush funds for criminals, we Democrats are actually talking about high gas prices, high health care premiums, high food costs, and what we can do to finally bring down costs for the American people.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time and responding to the breaking news with us. Have a happy Memorial Day with you and your family. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. You too.
These chicken hawk are going to send us home for Memorial Day weekend, where I'm going to honor my fellow veterans that I served 27 months in combat with, and they are going to not even give an up or down vote on continuing this war almost 3 months in, while Americans are paying almost $5 a gallon at the pump. It is pathetic. They use this procedural argument, and every American should just be absolutely outraged about this. It's a disgrace.
We need to get him on a podcast so we don't have to do all that bleeping. That was Democratic Congressman Pat Ryan last night, visibly outraged, but didn't seem too surprised, because naturally, what do House Republican leaders do when they are afraid of being rebuked by members of their own party over Donald Trump's increasingly unpopular and unaffordable agenda, including the war in Iran? Well, they call the whole thing off. Last night, House Republicans scrapped the war powers vote. It was meant to force Donald Trump to withdraw from the war in Iran, or at least try to get approval from Congress for it. After, as the New York Times puts it, quote, "It became clear they, the Republicans, lack the votes to defeat the measure." More from that report, quote, "The decision to shelve the war powers resolution came after Republicans had lost control of the floor during an earlier unrelated vote, with several of their members defecting and several more absent. As the House chamber descended into chaos, leaders wary of risking another public defeat on a far more politically consequential vote abruptly scrapped the Iran war measure." We're back with Paul and Michael. This is perhaps one of the biggest political stories in the second Trump term, that Trump doesn't have the political juice to continue to wage war in Iran?
I think you're right. Pat Ryan's a friend of mine, and he speaks for so many people. He also is a West Point grad, a combat veteran. He represents West Point. It's in his congressional district. And he understands what he's talking about. And I think he's touching on something that a lot of Americans feel, especially veterans feel right now, that there's a generation of chicken hawks that are sending other people's kids to die all over again. And I think Iran has become a dividing point, especially within the Republican Party, especially within the veterans and national security community, with people like in the manosphere, the podcasters like Joe Rogan and Sean Ryan. But I also want to say that...
Who are out.
They're done. They said, we're done. That's it. He said no regime change wars. And now Tulsi Gabbard's out, who her entire platform, she said no regime change wars more than any politician I've ever seen in the last 2 decades, right?
But it's J.D. Vance.
Yeah. And it's also Congress is also the dog chasing the car, because Iran's already underway. The question is, can they stop Cuba? Because he said Cuba's next. They're communicating it, like there's probably an over-under on the poly market now, whether he does it before or after July 4th. But they didn't stop him on Venezuela. They didn't stop him on Iran. They have an opportunity to stop him before he starts combat with a new country. And Cuba is that dividing line. I think we have to try to push that to the forefront and see where Republicans stand on that, because in some ways Iran's already underway.
Well, the thing that people say, and they point to Indiana and they point to Cassidy and I guess Massey and say, well, he's still really powerful in the Republican Party. You can't say that without pointing out how small the Republican Party is right now. It's shrinking by the week.
Yeah, I think Massey's really, really important. I've been talking about this a lot this week. I mean, he just carved out a whole new lane for a presidential campaign just by running against Iran, against the tariffs, in favor of releasing the Epstein files, and against Trump. That's a presidential platform that's pretty popular.
In either party.
In either party, or no party at all. He could also run as an independent and galvanize a lot of people. And he's worked across the line with Ro Khanna and others. So something's happening here. Whether the movement is going to be within the Republican Party to challenge Trump and whoever his successor is if he leaves power, or to actually break away. And they're representing a majority of the country that is against all those things, but also doesn't want to go to the Democrats. 45% of the country is independent and unaffiliated, and they're looking for voices who represent that angry majority, especially on national security and regime change wars.
It's amazing how wide open this question of national security is right now, Michael Feinberg.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm not quite as ready as you two to put up the bunting and celebrate at the Republicans' newfound discovery of integrity in the spine, because all we've got right now are, to use a word I hate, vibes. We don't have concrete actions. There haven't been votes on any of these things. There's been rhetorical pushbacks. There's been rumors leaking out of closed sessions. And when push comes to shove, the Republican voters have not supported the individuals who've pushed back. And the individuals who claim to push back when the moment of crisis comes don't. Mitch McConnell could have stopped all of this in that speech you played earlier and didn't. So I'm not confident that Republicans are actually going to have the mettle to follow through on this.
I'm with you. I appreciate the gentle blowback. That's why you're here. Michael Feinberg, Paul Rieckhoff, thank you both for being here today. Have a great weekend.
Those numbers reflect that people are changing their behavior because of Donald Trump's war and Donald Trump's refusal, in their minds, I think more and more growing, to do anything substantive about it.
I mean, the short answer, yes. Again, we're now talking about, pain at the pump, pain at the grocery store.
Don't talk to her about beef.
Beef is up. Is it still 16%? 16%.
And the president is going out there and talking about, the golden age. And there's so much pain and angst among the American public. He's out there playing the greatest hits for the base, and they just don't hit like they used to when gas is $4.50 a gallon. Those are the best political signs that you can make in America right now. He has lost all credibility on the economy, full stop. And Luke, I talk to Republicans every single day. And Michael, we were talking this week. Mm-hmm. If you're a Republican, why are you going out to vote in the midterms? Yeah. If you're a regular Republican, you're probably losing faith in a lot of this craziness. And even if you're a MAGA-based Republican, what are you out there voting for right now? It is just pure partisanship, and I'm not sure that is a pathway to election results. Yeah. Revenge over results is a disastrous plan as we head into the midterms.
That's a good point.
Anthony, it seems that the president, despite the fact that we're almost 2 years away from it, cannot stop thinking about Joe Biden.
How about it?
I want to play a clip from him today, just talking about Joe Biden once again. Here we are in May of 2026.
You had one candidate named Sleepy Joe Biden. What's a better name? Sleepy Joe Biden or Crooked Joe Biden? Ready? Who likes Sleepy Joe Biden? Who likes Crooked Joe Biden? About pretty similar. They're both pretty good.
Been alleged that the president has nodded off occasionally in some recent meetings in the Oval Office and other places. Oh, look at him there. I think he's in the cabinet room.
He looks asleep to me.
Hey.
I don't know. He looks asleep.
Out like a light.
You know, I'm thinking this week, Drake released some albums going back to Kendrick Lamar, which were about 2 years too late. And I'm thinking, is Donald Trump pulling a Drake right here? Are we 2 years past? Are we going that far back? What are you doing here? But I bring it up because we talk about the greatest hits.
Yeah.
What in the world, if you're a Democrat, you see this, you go, this is a gift. If he's still obsessed about Joe Biden is yesterday. Right? Bill Clinton, Bridge to the future. The future is your prices are going up. I mean, this is not a winning message for him.
It is not. But listen, let me tell you before I go off on my riff. I am not a Drake fan, but do not insult Drake like that. Do not compare him to Donald Trump. So listen, so we have what we just saw on the screen, right? We saw him attacking Joe Biden, right? He's attacking Iran. He's attacking the Pope. He's trying to build a ballroom. He is going after Jim Comey, right? He's doing all of these things. Now he's trying to pay convicted felons who beat the hell out of cops on January 6th. My point of bringing all of this up, Luke, is that he is focused on everything else but what people care about, what they elected him to do. And Simone opened this segment talking about polling. The most fascinating data in this New York Times Siena poll was not just the top line about how bad his favorability rating is, but if you look in the crosstabs, if you dig under the hood, you see he is hemorrhaging support amongst his base, amongst registered Republicans. I look specifically, I wanted to see what white voters without a high school degree, what they think about this economy. 72% view this economy negatively. And my last point on this is, if you look back, we've been in a midterm with Donald Trump before. 2018, the numbers that I just cited were not as bad as they were then. And in that race, Trump and his party lost 40 seats. That's why that's why the Republicans you guys are talking about on the Hill, that's why they are sounding the alarm, because the numbers are truly awful.
I mean, if we could just put a face to some of what we're talking about in terms of the numbers. The Wall Street Journal, I'm from Nebraska, y'all, so I care a lot about the beef. Okay, and how much it costs. Shout out to Omaha Steaks. They had a piece in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Caitlin Green pictured 30 people in her backyard for Memorial Day weekend. Then she priced the ground beef. A pound of it runs close to $8 where she shops, 2 times what she remembers paying a couple years ago, and more than she could stomach for feeding a crowd. I just feel awkward inviting so many people to my home and being like, I'm going to host you, but also can you pay me so that I can afford to have you over? Said Green, a 25-year-old real estate agent in Logan, Utah. That is real.
Bring your own beef.
Come on, I mean, or we're taking up a collection. It's like, yeah. You know, this should not be happening in the United States of America, and definitely not when apparently the government has $1.776 billion for people that I would just call the insurrectionists that took up arms against the government on January 6th. This split screen is terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot there. Let me just say, January 6th, I resigned January 6th, and I take no pride out of that. This town can be messy, lines can get blurred, but you better have a North Star, let me tell you, because it makes the hard things real easy sometimes. And this acting attorney general is only acting for the president, and it is an absolute disgrace. But even beyond that, you call back home, you talk to people, people are pissy right now, and they have every right to be. From gas to groceries, the American public want answers on the economy. on the war, and the president keeps talking about the arch and the ballroom. Right. We're heading into the 2026 midterms, and the president is obsessed with 2020 and Joe Biden. This is a recipe for disaster. As a Republican, this is just indefensible. I'm not sure what to say other than the truth, which is that this is absolutely unacceptable leadership here in America with legitimate issues at play here. So again, not being partisan, this is just called honesty.
Yeah, and let's just be honest about the fact that, you can think you're patriotic by stealing $1,776,000,000 and thinking that you're somehow
tax dollars,
right? Somehow you are patriotic because it's 1776, right? The thing about all of that for me, Anthony, is the fact that coupled with everything that we talked about and how people are kind of reading the tea leaves and the crosstabs are telling us what they really think believe beneath the surface, you're still left with this really nasty feeling in your gut that in the midst of all of the stuff I'm going through, this man is stealing $1 billion from me.
Right.
It would be like if you had your employer say to you, Anthony, every 2 weeks when you get paid, I'm taking out, 30% of your paycheck just for me and my family. And by the way, I'm going to give a little extra to my friends in the boardroom and some of my friends in the company across the street, because we kind of work together and we think this is for your benefit. Because there's some people out there that we want to take care of. So we're going to take that 30% out of your paycheck every 2 weeks. Right. How would you feel about that? And I think that's where America, they realize, wait a minute, hold up, you're doing what?
Right.
On top of everything else?
That's my point. And I think this is what we were talking about earlier, right? If you are a Republican who is trying to win, if you're up in 5.5 months, there are two things that win elections, right? I'm looking at the campaign operative over here. You have to have an authentic message that resonates and that persuades. And then you have to have a strong ground game. And those two things are connected. The message, you can't talk about a ground game if people don't believe authentically in what you are selling and what you're telling them. And so the clip that you read about the lady with the ground beef, that's why they are not going to be able to get over the line on Election Day if all is equal.
Joining us now, staff writer for The New Yorker, Susan Glasser, chief Washington correspondent at Midas Touch and host of Scott MacFarlane Reports, Scott MacFarlane, and executive editor at The Nation, John Nichols. Scott, think any of them are going to be looking in the mirror and wondering, God, what have we done?
I don't see how this fund survives in its current incarnation based on where we are right now, Katie. The senators are poised to offer amendment after amendment when they get back here next month to gut this thing like a fish, to pull out pieces, to firewall off anybody who hit a cop, to firewall off other people who tried to overturn an election. And I'm not sure where Republicans find 50 votes to stop any of these amendments. They can lose 3 Republicans on these votes. Seems they've already lost Bill Cassidy, Mitch McConnell, and Tom Tillis, who has absolutely coined the best phrase of the week, stupid on stilts. I'm going to get a T-shirt that says that for myself. But there are other Republicans who are poised to join them. I mean, I can't imagine Susan Collins, up for a fierce reelection, who's already expressed her concern, is going to be on board. And what about anybody else up for reelection? There are competitive races across the country. Who wants any ownership of this thing right now? It's going to get gutted, and it's going to get gutted as soon as the Senate gets back here. They ran away from town yesterday to avoid this topic. They can't avoid it forever.
Yeah, but listen, well, first off, Scott, you look tall on the camera, and I worry about you wearing a shirt that says stupid on stilts. I'm just going to put that out there. But I'm going to ask you, John, about whether it's too late. I mean, it's Memorial Day weekend. Start of the summer, people start to tune out. Congress is going to go on recess soon, a long recess. And a lot of the drama gets baked in. November is not that far off. So Congress may have left because they don't want to deal with this right now. But you know what? People are going to leave as well. They're tuning out from the news. So even if they go in and fix it, is it going to make the rounds the way that the fund itself has already made the rounds?
Well, and the ballroom is still in play, and there's a whole host of other, let's say you clean up this one, there's another issue awaiting there. And I think the gentleman who was at the start of the segment there, the guy up in, I think, Mike Lawler's district, who was...
Jay Breen, yes.
Yeah, who was just simply saying, look, we got a lot of problems here. We should really kind of get back to basics. His definition, if I'm reading right, getting back to basics is, worrying about people, make sure they got health care, that their job's okay, that they can make it in this difficult economic time.
Maybe not have gas at $4,
$5 in some places.
$6
and
even
so
a gallon.
Let me and that's kind of at the heart of this thing. I'm not sure that the specifics of any one of these issues, ballroom, this one, whatever, are as important as the sense that the Republican-controlled Congress just doesn't seem to be able to focus in on the fact that it's kind of hard to get by these days.
I mean, Susan Biden's team learned that you can't fight a feeling, to borrow a phrase. And the feeling back in the end of Biden's term was that the economy was bad and the future looked grim. And Donald Trump came in and said, I'm going to make it better. The feeling now is that Donald Trump, along with the Republican Party, doesn't care.
Well, I mean, it's not just a feeling, by the way. It's an objective reality that when it comes to the prices that Americans pay, whether it's the rate of inflation, which is now higher than inflation was when Donald Trump came into office, whether it is the price of gas, we've already mentioned that. Obviously, not only is it significantly higher than when Trump came into office, headed upwards. I believe he's the president who said that on day one of his presidency, in addition to ending that Ukraine war, which continues, he was going to be bringing down prices in the United States. So, it's a very specific record to run on. I was, sort of had to restrain myself from laughing a little bit there. In one of the quotes from one of the senators, he says, this is really terrible. This is adding to the deficit. This is the least of the things that are adding to the deficit. Donald Trump, Republican Party standard bearer, traditionally Republicans have been the party that has preached fiscal discipline, austerity. They came into office. Elon Musk said
so
he was
far from
$1
that.
trillion. And
Yeah.
in fact, the budget deficit has grown enormously. But the bottom line here is that it's not just some example of misspent government money. Would that it were that. That's bad enough. This is the president of the United States essentially looting the federal government on his own corrupt behalf. And I think we do need to be very clear with people. It's not just a sort of like, oh my, it's a policy disagreement we're having. It's hard to conceive of any planet in which any president of any party would have been allowed to get away with this in the past with any makeup of the U.S. Congress. Donald Trump is saying, I demand nearly $2 billion from the U.S. government to give to people who sacked our Capitol. And I do think it's really important not to use his phrasing of this quote unquote weaponization committee and to say to people that it's not just a question of how to spend money, but it's a question of blatantly raiding the U.S. Treasury on Donald Trump's personal behalf. It's shocking.
Scott, Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican, who's running for re-election in Pennsylvania, who, by the way, Donald Trump is not liking right now. He wants more information on this fund. What does he want exactly, and is he going to get some more backers in Congress?
I have some new reporting on this. First of all, I wanted to give you props for invoking REO Speedwagon and Can't Fight This Feeling on a Friday afternoon. Really well done, Katie. Brian Fitzpatrick's teammate on his effort to stop this fund is Tom Suozzi, the Democrat from New York. They had partnered up, one of each, one Democrat, one Republican. And Tom Suozzi says we're going to do the Noah's Ark theory, where we get one of each party to sign on to this legislation to outlaw the fund, to soften the ground for Republicans to feel comfortable to get on board. I'm not sure how many Republicans they can get on that arc, but they don't need many. You saw this on Thursday when just a few Republicans derailed the plan to have an Iran war powers vote because Democrats and just a few Republicans were going to hand the president a defeat. Just a few can defeat the fund.
Just a few. You're right. Susan, let me talk to you about the Democrats. How do they use it? What do they say? You just spoke to Jason Crow about it. What's the idea here?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Corruption actually is a pretty powerful campaign message. We've seen that in many other countries. I've been particularly interested in the campaign that ultimately ousted Viktor Orban, Hungary's very long-serving leader, in a campaign that focused on something as sort of simple and immediately graspable as the idea that he and his family had grown so wealthy that exotic animals were overrunning an estate owned by his father, including zebras. The zebras became the symbol of the opposition in Hungary. People were bringing zebra stuffed animals to opposition rallies. And ever since then, I've been asking myself, what's the zebra? In American politics, I think a lot of people, the answer has been the ballroom, $1 billion ballroom, especially because Trump personally seems to have fetishized it so much, right? He's literally bringing reporters in to give it a tour, things like that. There is a question, though. Democrats remain very divided among themselves, as we all know to this day, about the proper way to campaign against Donald Trump. Is it enough to oppose him? Do we have to have agreement, which we don't have, on, the kind of the rest of the program or not? But, right now when people are economically struggling and there's this gap that's wider than ever before between the emerging, let's call them the emerging trillionaire class with whom Donald Trump has surrounded himself, building ballrooms and the like, inviting them on his plane to go to China. And then, it seems like the ladder is being pulled up for everybody else in this economy.
Well, what's interesting is that the Times, in their most recent polling, found that among Democrats, there is actually not that much disagreement over where to go on policy and whether the Democratic Party needs to be more progressive or more moderate. Most Democrats feel good with where the party is right now. What they do want, John, is to lean into populist politics.
That's right.
I mean, stuff like that gentleman in the beginning was talking about. Focus on people here. As Susan was just mentioning, Donald Trump has surrounded himself with the billionaire class. Democrats, Democratic voters want them to focus on that. Democratic politicians have not been so good, by and large, there are some exceptions, at focusing on the billionaire class.
You're very generous in saying not been so good. If you read the autopsy report, kind of a mess of a report, but if you read what came out, I mean, even there, one of the sub-themes was, maybe we should have talked a little more about economics in 2024.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party has struggled with this for a long time, let's be blunt. They have people who want to raise money from donors who often have interests. Those interests have not usually been on the side of populism, right? On the side of going out and being blunt. And as I go around the country, I've been very, very struck. The Democrats who are rising, who are doing well in races around the country, sometimes outsiders who are pushing aside more established incumbents or more established figures in their states, tend to be criticizing both parties. This is a very interesting dynamic. They will get up in front of a crowd and they will say, the Republicans are doing terrible stuff. There are, so many things that are wrong. And they will say, and the Democrats have been a mess as well. The Democrats have screwed up on these things as well. And that is often as big an applause line as the Republican criticism.
All right. John Nichols, always good to have you. Thanks for showing up in person. Scott MacFarlane, I'm glad you got my REO Speedwagon reference. Usually it's fish around here, but we threw a new one out there, and I appreciate you catching it. Susan, do not go anywhere.
The fact of the matter is we're talking about two different issues here, right? The underlying legislation is that $72 billion ICE and Border Patrol funding bill that Republicans are trying to get to President Trump's desk. But the thing that stymied that plan last night was this anti-weaponization fund. Essentially what we've seen is increasing GOP opposition and criticism of this fund. And essentially Republicans said some of them wanted to see guardrails in this bill to try and block the fund overall. And some folks just wanted more information before moving forward. That sort of culminated with this meeting that Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche had with GOP senators yesterday. It lasted about 2 hours, and coming out of the meeting, there was still some opposition. I spoke to Susan Collins. She's the chairwoman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. She said she still wanted more information. And take a look at what Senator Mitch McConnell had said. He really didn't mince words about this anti-weaponization fund, writing in a statement, quote, "So the nation's top law enforcement official is asking for a slush fund fund to pay people who assault cops. Utterly stupid, morally wrong. Take your pick. So, Anna, clearly Republicans not mincing words there. And essentially at the end of the day, because this was a curveball hurled at them at the beginning of the week, they couldn't find a way out of the mess and to solve all of their differences, which is why they ended up scrapping those plans for a reconciliation vote, letting these issues essentially fester over the next week and a half as they're on Memorial Day recess.
So that was what was going on in the Senate. Meantime, there is now a bipartisan bill in the House to block this quote-unquote anti-weaponization fund. What can you tell us about this new potential legislation?
Yeah, it's important to note that this Republican opposition is not just in the Senate. It is very much so in the House. In fact, as you mentioned, we're seeing legislation now. There's the bipartisan duo of Brian Fitzpatrick, the Republican, and Tom Suozzi, the Democrat. These are the co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus up on Capitol Hill. They have very brief, short legislation that would essentially say that no taxpayer funds can be used for this fund. The reasoning is that they say Congress has the power of the purse. They have overview over taxpayer money. And as a result, they are going to block any taxpayer money from being used to settle claims as part of this fund. Essentially, they're saying that this is not good for the country and that there's too many questions about what this money could be used for. Take a listen to what they said on Morning Joe this morning talking about this effort.
It's a one-paragraph law that says you can't use the money to fund this anti-weaponization fund. Sometimes people do stupid or really wrong things, and you need the other branch of government to stand up and say, no, that's wrong, that's stupid, we're going to stop it. That's the purpose of the checks and balances of our system.
A lot of people say things quietly, but when it comes to putting pen to paper and putting their name on this as a co-sponsor, they get a little bit hesitant. I'm working to change that. I will take the slings and arrows. I'm happy to do it. This is the right thing to do, and hopefully others follow. I think they will.
And, Anna, worth noting that this effort by Fitzpatrick and Suozzi came one day after Fitzpatrick, again, the Republican in this duo, had sent a letter to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche asking for more information about the fund. He told me that because he didn't get more information on it and more specifics, he's now moving forward with this legislation. Of course, the big question is, when could we see a vote on this, if at all? Congress out of session until the beginning of June for Memorial Day recess. I'm told from a source familiar with this effort that these two are going to wait and see if leadership puts it on the floor on their own volition. If not, they could look to other avenues, including a discharge petition.
Yep, that's what we saw with the Epstein Act, and we saw how that all unfolded. Michael Schnell, thank you. Congressman Riggleman, what kind of political risk is there for Fitzpatrick, Republican part of this bipartisan legislation, him sticking his neck out there on all this, especially given what we saw this week with Massey and Cassidy?
You know, Brian might be the last of the moderates. You know, I served with Brian, you know, in the 116th. And I think for him, right, being in a swing district, this is actually helpful for him. But I don't see a whole lot of Republicans signing on to this in the House. I think you're going to have more of a backlash in the Senate based on the fact that they're not up for election every 2 years. And you see with a lot of the Republicans, they're more worried about election than protecting the American taxpayer. And I'm going to be pretty personal here. What President Trump put out, his statement, and I just read it when you put it up, Anna, I really appreciate it, is a liar and a grifter that's cementing his actual reputation as that. First of all, you know, a lot of people say 1.8 billion or 1.7 billion. It's 1.776 billion, which is really a dog whistle to conspiracy theorists and QAnon. You know, he's been posting on Truth Social with him as Q+. He's been doing all this type of stuff. And you also have self-dealing on a level we've never seen in the presidency, a corruption that is hard for us to even define or to get our arms around. And for me, as a former Republican, somebody who goes outside of constitutional bounds to gift his family with monies, it's not just, you know, when he says that he isn't self-enriching himself, you're looking at the rise in his fortunes to $6.5 billion. He could be holding up to $10 billion in crypto. His sons are self-dealing in drone companies in the military-industrial complex. And now he's trying to gift his friends, cronies, criminals, and cop beaters with a money line of $1.76 billion that mirrors what QAnon actually believed in the January 6, 2021, riot and the stolen election. So that's why this is so heinous. I think it's openly corrupt. And I think anybody who stands for it really does self-identify who's somebody who cares more about themselves and being reelected than the American people and the rule of law.
MS Now did speak to some voters in the swing state of Georgia about this settlement fund. Here's what they're saying.
January 6th, that should have been a dead issue. In other words, we resolved that. They were found guilty. Why would we give them some kind of fund to help them along when other Americans are starving.
So do you think they should be getting money to help with their legal?
No, not at all. No, they should do like we do. Like if I go to jail, I got to pay my lawyer fees and getting out of jail fees and all of that. No.
The government is not for the people anymore. The government has their own agenda.
Congresswoman Demings, how can Democrats channel this collective outrage that's out there beyond one moment, one news cycle?
Well, you know, it's interesting to me to hear Mitch McConnell's statement, because when he really led the way for the president to be acquitted after trying to bribe a foreign power, Ukraine, when he led the way for the president's acquittal after instigating a riot at the Capitol. Look, I was in the House chambers on January 6th. That's a non-issue. You're talking about creating a fund for people. Many of them pleaded guilty. And a fund to compensate them just makes absolutely zero sense. But the voters are basically saying and feeling like what Congress should be saying and feeling. This is ridiculous. And it's sad that there are still too many Republicans in Congress who don't have a floor. This is corruption at its best. Congress can stop it. Listen to the voters, the people who elected you, and do the right thing.
Liz, this panel that would be doling out the money from this anti-weaponization fund hasn't quite been set up yet, but plenty of people are already saying they are eyeing a payday, including convicted seditionist Enrique Tarrio, the leader of the far-right Proud Boys. He says he's hoping potentially for as much as $5 million. And several former Trump aides, including his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who pleaded guilty to tax charges in Trump's first term. You have numerous convicted and pardoned January 6th rioters, one telling CNN that they hope to get $30 million. Liz, do you see this arrangement surviving litigation?
I think there are real doubts about the legality of this arrangement. It seems to be a plainly illegal theft of taxpayer dollars by Donald Trump and his Attorney General, Todd Blanche. The question legally is who is able to challenge this. There is a Supreme Court doctrine called taxpayer standing that makes it very difficult for citizens to challenge the misuse of their tax dollars. So it really falls to Congress to do that, and Congress is the best situated branch of government. They have under the Constitution the responsibility, not just the power, but the responsibility to safeguard taxpayer dollars. And it looks like they are stepping up to do this. In the meantime, there are other officials who have really just shockingly and unconscionably abandoned their constitutional duties. Todd Blanche, as the acting Attorney General, has a fiduciary duty to the American people to defend against frivolous litigation like this lawsuit that Donald Trump filed that was the pretext for this settlement fund. He has a constitutional duty not to settle frivolous lawsuits out of taxpayer funds. And he really betrayed the American people in a staggering manner here, perhaps the worst betrayal we have ever seen from any attorney general in history.
And there are still some GOP Republicans publicly supporting this fund. Here's Republican Ralph Norman.
Yeah, I support it.
You do support it?
Yeah. January 6th is an issue that was made up in the first place.
People were convicted of assaulting.
Well, I know that. That was a staged thing from day one.
Your Republican colleagues ran for their life and barricaded themselves in their chamber. Do you think they were acting?
No, there was a riot there, but it was a self-made riot by members who hate Trump. It was made up.
Congressman Riggleman, as someone who focused on extremism and misinformation and who helped the January 6th committee, what is your reaction to a sitting congressman saying the Capitol attack was staged, made up?
Disgust. You know, when you have that kind of credulity and lying that's happening, you start to wonder what other words you can have to define it. Listen, our team found the January 6th or deciphered the January 6th text messages. And what people don't know about that specific individual, and I know Ralph Norman, I served with him, he called for martial law. He called for literally military seizure of machines with Marjorie Taylor Greene and the January 6th text messages. In that same interview, he also referred to January 6th and QAnon conspiracy theories on Ray Epps, which is actually one of the worst. It's one of the worst conspiracy theories that was pushed by Darren Beatty in the Revolver and also far right, MAGA individuals. Here's the thing that, you have to start looking at is that anybody who supports this, and by the way, the list that you showed, I would love to talk about Michael Cohen and Peter Tickton. I know every single person on that list because I was the senior technical advisor on the January 6th committee. I did look at the weaponization of actual executive orders. But when you're talking about those two specifically, everybody else is scumbags. This might be the most esteemed list of scumbags you've ever put on your actual screen here, Anna. But when you're talking about Peter Tickton, he was the one who was the lawyer for the commutation of Tina Peters, which just happened through Jared Polis. He's also the one who just wrote the draft executive order to give the president more powers to seize voting machines. I don't know if people know that. And when you talk about Michael Cohen, somebody who came out who said he was somehow redeemed, a leopard doesn't change their spots, right? And what he's trying to do also, somebody who's also an adjudicated liar, when you see people like this going after the fund, it shows the absolutely moral debasement of anybody who believes in January 6th conspiracy theories or anybody who supports this.